I am grateful today to have Brad Furtney on the People's Playbook podcast. Brad is a business builder, and I can tell you from knowing Brad and working with Brad, he's what I like to refer to as a scale-up expert. He's able to take companies from, you know, all companies have some good revenue coming in, but just increase that revenue by increasing culture. He's known for his people-first leadership. He's great at thought-provoking conversations to get us going and empowering his team and creating culture first to drive those teams. So Brad, welcome to the show today.
It's great to be here, Jason. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. We're thrilled that you took us up on it. So Brad, let's dive right into it. So you have had the opportunity and the privilege, I like to say, of leading some great organizations, right? So and some of those organizations are 20 million in revenue. Some, some are higher, some are lower, but the big thing is you're always able to increase them. So there's one example from, 20 million to 300 million. When you do stuff like that and you go into a company, what is the first leadership move that you make to stepping into a growth stage company?
I think, when you first get into a company, I'll use the last place I joined, Evercommerce, and I got there. It was a company that was acquired. The software company bought 50 software companies from founders. And so it was founder led. And so when I got there, it was a founder run organization where the founders made the decisions, right? And so the first thing I always look at is, do we have strategic alignment? And you know this from our time working together. If you can't point the team in the direction that you want to go with clarity, it's impossible to achieve success because no one knows where we're heading. So I start with strategic alignment. Do we know what our right strategy is? Do we know where we want to be in 3 to 5 years? And what are our sort of action points that we can tackle today, right? And so that leads into process. And I know you're a process guy, right? You can have this great strategy, which is amazing and gets people excited. But if you don't have a process to follow, and I think of strategy as, that big goal down the road. And I think of strategy as, what are my short-term goals? I'm a believer in OKRs, objective key results. I'm a disciple. I've used them for years. You break them down by quarter that are tied to your long-term strategy. Yeah, so you have a 3-year strategy, but you also have a strategy for the year. What are our quarterly goals that will help us get to our strategy for 2025 as an example? And then you break that down at company level, and I break it down at functional level, and I've even pushed it down into individual level. Individual level is always interesting because some people buy into it and some people don't drink the Kool-Aid. But I love process, Jason, because when I get up in the morning, I don't have to think of what to do. It's there. Here's my priorities based on the strategic thinking and planning and process we put in place to drive the business forward. Now, if a competitor does something, the market changes, we pivot, right? Because you have to pivot.
Yeah.
It's not like we're stuck to our plan. So long-term strategy linked to a process, I use OKRs. And then I look at talent. Do I have the right people in the right seats to deliver against the strategic plans and initiatives we have? So those are the 3 things: strategy, process, and people.
Nice, nice. So question, you said something there. When you bring it down to the individual level and they're not buying in, how do you address that? How do you create that buy-in? So hopefully they get there, and what happens if they don't?
There's a bunch of questions in there, by the way. That wasn't just one question.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
It's about accountable leadership, being really clear on what you want, right? That ties to the strategy, and then breaking that down into what's the next step towards our strategy. So that could be revenue, that could be product, that could be marketing, that could be people, right? What are those things that you need to do? And you have to hold yourself accountable. It starts with you, Jason.
Mhm.
You're a leader, and I know you are the most disciplined. I'll take ownership of everything. If, as the leader, you don't take accountability to what you said you'll do, so do what you say you do, basically walk the talk.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, no one else is going to hold themselves accountable to their process or to their goals, right?
Yeah.
Starts with you. And then it's about, we said we're going to accomplish this in the quarter or this in the month. How do we do? I always, with my OKRs, I do weekly check-ins and I use the traffic lights. Are we red? Are we green? Are we yellow? Right? Are we on track? And at the end of the quarter, you measure your progress against that objective. Was it revenue? Did we launch a product? Did we increase our customer satisfaction scores? What were they? And so you can hold your people accountable because you have defined metrics to do that in every job. In every function, you have defined metrics. The
Yeah.
challenging part becomes, when do they hold themselves accountable? When do they
Uh-huh.
take responsibility? And you asked, one of your sub questions was, what do you do if they don't? Right? Those are always the hard conversations. And I always find that most people lean in and want to do a good job. Most people show up every day and go, I'm here to do a great job today and I want to be successful. Sometimes people are on the wrong jobs. They're not motivated. Maybe they have distractions. You need to dig in. Okay, you missed your numbers this quarter. What happened? What's going on? There could be something outside the company that you aren't aware of. Good leaders ask questions. Good leaders are thoughtful in how they probe and understanding what are the roadblocks, right?
Absolutely.
And if you find something external, health, relationship, finance, whatever, you have to be a little bit understanding about that, but still hold them accountable, right? This is our job to do, especially in sales. You and I grew up in the sales world. Salespeople are all about being accountable. So it's
Yeah.
interesting when you're leading people that didn't come from
Yeah.
a sales background, and I put that accountability, but you
Yeah.
hold them accountable, and if they don't get there, then you make a harder decision.
Harder decision. Yeah. You said something about asking questions. I'm curious. Have you ever watched the show Ted Lasso?
I love the show Ted Lasso.
Yeah, so his one scene on Be Curious is probably one of my favorite scenes of all time, when he's just talking about asking questions and asking more questions than you think you actually need to know, right? Because when you are curious, it's amazing actually what you find out, both about a person personally and what they may be going through, but more importantly, just kind of what that person's all about, what makes them tick, and how they're going to be in your organization. So I love your people aspect on that. I know that you've had the privilege of working with a lot of high potential leaders and individuals. How do you identify and nurture those potential leaders in your organization when you first come in?
First of all, let me start out by saying we need to make better leaders in the world today.
I agree.
And I know this is a passion point for you. That's why you do what you do. We don't have great examples, especially in the political realm in North America today, on great leadership. Leadership is always sort of secondary. Companies always talk about, we're going to develop and grow our people. I've been in companies where the CEO has stood up. I was in the meeting, I remember it vividly. And then he stood up and said, we're going to invest in leadership development next year. So I put my hand up and say, well, how much? Like, show me the investment. And guess what happened next year? Zero, right?
Zero.
Because it's easy to say, it's the right thing to say. And why is leadership and culture important? Because in the long run, it increases stock price, profitability, revenue. It does all those things. We know it does. But what it doesn't do in the short term is drive the share price per quarter, right? And so that's why people focus on revenue and bottom line initially, and they get sucked into the, especially publicly traded companies.
Sure.
They get sucked into the quarterly performance because you don't see the instant results in leadership development. So it's super important that we invest in this, because in the long run, and by the way, I believe, and there's research that proves that in the long run, the market will value culture and leadership development in companies, because in the long run, that company will become more successful. It will drive more revenue. It'll have higher customer satisfaction scores, or whatever their business they're in, right? Identifying talent, I think, starts with this. The best performers in functional levels don't always make the best leaders. The best salesperson doesn't make the best leader. Matter of fact, I think sometimes not the best sales leader, using sales as an example, can make a better leader. Do they care about their people? Do they lean in? Do they put other people before them? You and I have both had bosses in our careers. A lot of people have had where their boss puts themselves ahead of everyone else, and it's so obvious.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they don't really care about your career, your development, but a great leader cares about their staff, their growth and development. I've been very fortunate in my career where I've sold multi-million dollar deals, and people say, what is the most thing you're proud of? It's not the big deals that I've closed, or the sponsorships or whatever. It's when I've made a difference in one of my staff members' lives to be better at their job, which hopefully makes them better as a human outside of their job too, right?
Yeah.
That to me is I want to make better leaders in this world.
For sure.
I wouldn't say, there's a great debate about passion and obsession, right? Do you follow your passion or do you follow your obsession? My obsession, which I think is deeper than a passion, is to make better leaders in this world, wherever I am. Because if I do that, around me, the boat will float higher. It will go faster. The car will perform better, whatever analogy you want to use. So you need to find people that will lean in, listen, be curious, the old Ted Lasso, be curious, and not be afraid to hold people accountable. So it's that balance of supporting, coaching, directing, caring, and also having the courage because it takes courage to be a leader, to hold people accountable. So roundabout way to answer your question.
Yeah, no, it's a great thing. You said a couple things in there, gems that I like. So I do believe what you say. It's not because it's my opinion. It's because it's true that companies with greater cultures that have a better culture make more money than companies that don't. They work hard at it, right? They work hard at it. Or why does every C-suite person I talk to during a day, why do they worry about culture so much if it doesn't transform to money, right? The other thing you said there, which resonated with me was, we do need better leaders. And one of the factors of disengagement when people leave a company, the number two factor, actually, first one is right person, right role. Am I in the right role? Do I feel like I'm part of it? Do I actually like what I'm doing? Number one. Number two is who's leading the team, right? And what I mean by that, Brad, is who's my direct manager? Maybe not the CEO, but who's my direct manager that's leading me? And when I do this in rooms and I do this with functions, I'll say, who's left a company because of a bad boss? And 99% of the hands go up because they just said, I couldn't take him or her anymore. I just couldn't take it, right?
They didn't
And
care. They didn't pay attention. There was no structure to our relationship,
yeah, yeah. And what I encouraged them to do, I then take the other side and I said, who stayed with the company because of an amazing boss, an
Mm,
amazing leader?
that's a great
And,
question.
and then I tell them, I say, can you please do me a favor? Can you reach out to that leader today?
Mm.
Can you text them? Can you phone them? Can you email them? And can you do something to let them know they were a great leader and they made a difference in your life? Because as leaders, we often get told what we did wrong. And I believe every leader does some things wrong along the way. We all have, we all will, and we will continue to do so because we're human beings. But it's really nice to hear sometimes when you did something right and you made a difference in somebody's life because especially I look at the younger generation, Brad, when I see, my kids and stuff. I'm just like, I want them to have great leadership. I want them to have, and I'm not talking the family values right now. I'm talking out in the work world. I want them to have somebody that they can actually say, wow, that person taught me some stuff and I got some growth out of that. And I actually enjoy doing what I'm doing. And I took something from him or her. I stole a little bit from him and her to put in my tool belt. So hopefully in the future, I'll be a great leader, right?
Yeah, it is a journey to be a good leader. I don't know if one can ever say they're a great leader. I think you say you're a good leader. I believe in the theory of the day you stop learning is the day you stop living. And it's sort of a philosophy I have about life is that I always want to continue to grow. I think I'm a good leader. I think I've learned a lot. To your point, I've made some really poor choices as a leader, especially when you first start out as a leader. One of the things you want to be liked, right? We
Yeah.
all want to be liked. And so it's that balance of being liked and holding people accountable. That is so hard, right?
Yeah.
And, I had some really good feedback in my early career about being tougher, holding people accountable. And I've learned from that. And I've had to make tough decisions. And when you have to let your first person go as a leader, that is fun. You can't sleep the night before. You typically have HR and there's a script that you try and follow, but still it's super hard.
Yeah.
But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, is if you've done your work as a leader, you've held that person accountable and they still can't get to where they need to get to, you've invested, then it's the right decision. It's the right decision for them, although
Yeah.
they may not love it at the time, and it's the right decision for the organization.
When I get rid of somebody to this day, even though I've done it, numerous times, unfortunately, it just happens in companies. I still feel that feeling in my gut that I don't like, and I still don't sleep the night before because I think to myself, this person's still a human being. They still have a car payment. They still have a mortgage. They still have a family, right?
Yeah.
And even though it didn't work out here, I still want it to work out for them in life. And I believe, if you don't feel like that, because you said you lose sleep the night before, and I know that feeling because I've had some sleepless nights as well when there's a reorg or something's going on in the organization where you have to make some tough decisions and whatnot. And you're sometimes you're saying bye to somebody who's really good and a really good human being. And it has nothing to do with them as a human being. It just has to do with, the environment of the time, right?
Yeah. And gone are the days of people staying at companies for their entire career. I mean, unfortunately, the North American model, global model maybe, is that reorgs are part of how you stay lean and mean. And there's a hiring phase and they hire a bunch of people. Then
Sure.
there's oh my goodness, we need to cut back expenses. And in most companies, the biggest expense line item is
People.
salaries, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Brad, you've what's really interesting and unique and kind of cool about your career is you've dealt with startups, you've dealt with global organizations. How or do you change your leadership style to adapt to those different scales along the way?
It's interesting. I've always seen myself as an entrepreneur. I always thought, actually, when I graduated business school, that I'd work for a big company for a little bit and then I'd own a company. I never did, but I had the opportunity to be the leader, I would say, take ownership of a business unit, right? Of businesses within a portfolio was my last role, right? I ran
Yeah.
2 companies. But even when, you and I are both at Labatt and Olin Specialty Beer Company came around, I felt like I was an owner. Labatt credit, they told us from day one, like when you were in sales, you treat your territory like it's your company. And
Yep.
so I've always had that mindset of I'm the leader of this organization, whether it's a company within a company, whether it's a division, whether it's a
Yep.
team, or whether it's a truly standalone organization in a portfolio of companies. So I don't really see the difference of how you lead and how you operate. I still have the strategic focus. I still have how do I improve my process. I used to hate process, by the way, getting back to process. It's like, I'll just wing it. And then you do that for a year or so in your career, and then you go, I can't do this anymore.
It's
It's
not
too
sustainable.
stressful. It's not
Yeah.
sustainable. So then I became this disciple of OKRs, and that helped me. And then obviously, leading people. So I don't look at whether it's a division of a bigger company or a standalone company any really differently in that I have those three processes, three sort of approaches: strategy, process, alignment to the strategy, and investment in people. And I've really had the opportunity to invest in people, especially in my last role where I was leading these 2 companies, and they were founder led. When I got there, day 2, the founder left of the one company. The founder had left of the other company prior to my arrival. But the founder made all the decisions. So it was
Yeah.
like he would talk to Jason, he would talk to Brad. You were the VP of marketing, I was the VP of sales, whatever it was. And he would make all those decisions. He'd hire them for your teams. So when I
Yeah.
got there, I was amazed at, I had people with titles, but they didn't have the leadership skill set. They were good people. They had some skill set, but it was never a focus. So I invested in that because I recognized that was a challenge. I'll also go back up and say, I've had a leadership coach, and I know you're in that business today and you've very coachable. I've had a leadership coach since about 2012. And there's been some uncomfortable conversations with my coach to go, Brad, I want you to, let's pull back the onion in this part that you don't want to talk about, right?
Yeah.
But it's made me better. And so I recognized at Evercommerce, I had 9 or 10 direct reports that had never formally led or had the responsibility to lead. And so we put in a leadership development program. In the first year, Jason was about I brought in Michelle, my leadership coach, and we did one-on-one coaching with me and my direct reports. And the next year, we put people into groups, so similar managers in the separate companies, and they had sort of a group coaching approach. Third year, we did the group coaching, some one-on-one still, but we did cross-pollination between the 2 companies. So they have different challenges, different problems, different markets they play in,
Yeah.
but they had great learning from, again, same level of management, but from different organizations. And then year 4 and year 5, we went further down into the organization. So by the 5th year, we had identified, I call them the next gen talent. When you see that star in the making, they may be, frontline customer success. They might be in
Sure.
sales. They might get market ego. That young kid, and they're typically younger, has
Yeah.
star potential. And so we put them into a leadership group, and they got coached from the executive coach. And guess what happened to our culture scores over those 5 years?
Skyrocketed.
Because we got to compare my 2 companies versus the 50 other companies in the portfolio organization.
Yeah.
And my companies, and I don't take credit for all of it, but I take credit for pulling the program together and
Taking action.
taking action, right? Our scores were always in the top 10, top 5 of all the companies. And guess what? We doubled revenue. We increased profitability. We made these companies bigger, better, and stronger. And after my departure, there was strong leadership. And so as they started to reorg the total organization into a different strategy, a different structure, those people in my org got those opportunities to take on increased roles and responsibilities because they had leadership development. And no other leaders in the portfolio of companies invested into leadership growth.
Yeah. Yeah. I had one guest on our podcast, Brian Baisley. Brian is absolutely massive into culture as well. He said, you go into these companies and they have all these operating principle books and they have all these rules of, SOPs. And they say there's this only one thing on culture and people. And it's this big sign on the door and whatnot. But there's no, he goes, I say, let me see your book. Where's your actual playbook on people? He says, they never have one. Right? They never have one. So that's what he actually does. He goes in and he actually helps them create a playbook for people. And he's brilliant at what he does. I just think it's so true, that statement, right? Like I could go into any company and see any book that they have, right? I can just see kind of everything that they have on their SOPs, their standards, their operating principles, their guidelines, their policies. But one book on people, you'll be looking for a long time for sure.
So going back to strategy, most companies always say at the high level, people are important. There's a bucket for people are important, right?
Yeah.
Does it hit your OKRs? You call it a playbook. I'll use the OKR analogy, right?
Sure.
Both companies, every quarter, every annual plan, every quarter plan, there was an action item. What are we doing around people today?
Yeah.
And we measured ourselves against that every quarter, right? At the company level, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it drilled down into functions because they were in a hiring mode or they had some challenges. So there was action items there. But I never, ever let people slide because it's easy to let slide.
Yeah.
There's always something here's a fire we need to put out. True. But if you don't invest in the people, that's going to become a fire. Or you're going to have people that turn over and you just don't have people to stick around because they don't feel valued.
Yeah, absolutely.
Funny how humans we want to be valued, eh?
Yeah.
Simple. Right?
Yeah. It's you know what? I love what you just said there. It's simple. It's actually simple, but we make it difficult. Brad, you've been obviously you have many leadership stories. Can you tell me a story about a challenge that you might have had that taught you an unexpected lesson about people management or leadership?
I'm going to go back to the Evercommerce story.
Sure.
The fact that we actually measured culture, and I've been in companies where they did employee surveys and you get your report from your team and maybe your department, but you never really get compared to the overall organization and just kind of, I think it's a checkbox that HR goes, yeah, we did that. And to see the evolution of our business from a financial and profitability standpoint, but from a cultural and leadership standpoint, because we invested down in the organization, not just at my direct reports, not at the executive leadership team level. We went, levels below that.
Yeah.
That's where the impact happened. Because you mentioned it's not about the big boss that matters so much.
Yeah.
It's about your direct manager.
Correct.
So
Correct,
we invested at the direct manager level throughout the organization. And we had some managers that learned a lot. We had some managers that, struggled initially, right? And they were probably very uncomfortable in these leadership coaching sessions. And by the way, not everyone, and you would recognize this, not everyone adjusts to or wants executive coaching. And that was the learning in the first year. I had everyone in my direct level, one-on-one coaching, and I would work with Michelle and we'd kind of talk about themes and how's the team doing. And we recognized that not everyone wants that feedback. You were an athlete growing up. I was an athlete growing up. Athletes or not just theater or whatever it is, where you've been in an environment where you get feedback and coaching and it's a gift and you treat it as such. It's good, but not everyone's grown up in environments where they want feedback.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they look at it as, well, I'm screwing up. And I look at it as, what a gift. And yes, it's uncomfortable at times. You're like, oh, I just blew that meeting up.
Yeah.
And how do I, figure this out? But I think coaching and the investment we put in, and one last point about why it made such a difference was we got so deep into the organization. Do you remember I'm going to ask you a question now. Do you remember your first job as a manager?
Yeah. I do.
Typically, I'm sure this happened, and maybe you got lucky and you were one of the few, but it's kind of like, congratulations, Brad, Jason, you're a manager. There's your office. There's your team. Go. Good luck.
That's it. You're right.
Right. Like no support, no direction, no kind of, here's some leadership 101 tactics and tools and skill set, right? But we promoted 4 people one year into their first time ever being a manager, and we had them in the leadership development program as a unique group. So they had similar challenges, and they probably went through the phase of, I want to be liked, but I got to hold my people accountable, and they could talk about those things. And so can you imagine if every company, when there was someone promoted, they had access to some form of coaching? We're lucky if we have a good boss in our career. I always say that. You're lucky if you have a good boss. Yeah. Right. And if you don't, go and find a mentor, go and find a coach. I would say invest in yourself. Yep. Yes, coaches you can spend money on coaches. I always love the analogy. I was actually last week, I presented at RBC. I was working with a friend of mine and we did a leadership session. And I put up my standard question. How many coaches does a professional golfer have?
Yeah.
A swing coach, putting coach,
Sure.
finance coach, public speaking coach, relationship coach. Well, there's
Yeah.
5 in 20 seconds,
Sure.
right? I said to the group, the audience, how many coaches have you had in your career?
So true.
0. You're
Yeah.
lucky if you have a good boss that leans in and holds you accountable and cheers you on and all those things, right?
Sure.
So find a mentor, find a coach. Hopefully you get a good boss, but you have no control on that one.
Yeah. And reach out to, in those circumstances, if somebody's being led by somebody they don't like or they don't, connect with, I do believe in exactly what you're saying. Invest in yourself, and it doesn't have to be expensive. So people think, oh, invest. What? I don't have the money for that. No. What about, hey, that guy over there looks like he's doing something well. What about an email reaching out saying, hey, you know what? I'd love to get to know you, and I'd love to get your kind of opinion on a couple of things. Would you make some time? You'd be surprised when you reach out to somebody that they'll make time for you. And you're excellent at that. You're excellent at that. I've seen your LinkedIn post where you said, hey, if anybody needs to talk or if anybody's looking for something I can help in any way, let me know. Right?
And then the amount of information that's accessible today, like podcasts. I was listening to the Huberman Lab yesterday, and he had a leader on it about communication skills. It was amazing. They talked about, being curious came up for sure. But as he was talking about probing questions, he said, one of the great things you can talk to your employees about, and they're struggling with something, and just say 3 words, tell me more.
Yeah.
Tell me more. Help
Tell
me
me more, yeah.
understand this. I want to understand this. And it's like
Yeah.
that little gem that I picked up yesterday is like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. They
Right?
get talking, right?
Yeah.
It's asking the why without asking the why, right? It's
Right.
actually getting them talking, and it gets them, it gets almost like, it's almost like you're a detective in a very covert way, and they don't feel like you're being intrusive. They just say, okay, you want to hear more? I'll tell you more.
Right. And then as the coach, you listen and you lean in and you'll start to hear themes. You'll start to hear a part of them that they're struggling in one area. And if you listen well enough, they'll repeat enough that you go, I think we should dig in here.
Yeah.
I think we can maybe uncover an opportunity that's causing you some challenges and talk about it. Right. But to your point, networking, podcasts, whether you get executive coach or not, ask for them too, by the way. Talk to your manager.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to grow in this organization. Is there a program that we could, look into?
Yeah. And you just said a key thing there too. Ask. If you don't ask, sometimes you can't assume that they know sometimes where you want to go or what you like. And when you just ask and say, hey, that interests me. Do you think I could be part of that? Or can I be part of that committee? Even though, it's an extra thing that I need to do, but maybe I'll get to know her and maybe I'll get to know him.
Yes.
They're pretty good leaders in the organization. I'll get some exposure to them. Right. And good things happen when you're curious. And when you say yes. I had one guest on and he said, the way I became successful is I just said yes until I made it. And he said, I learned so much along the way. Right.
So good.
Brad.
I'll do that.
Yeah. Right. Just say yes. Right. And and figure it out along the way and dive in. Brad, you're always generous with your time. I do have one more question for you before I let you go about your day and, do your thing. Actually, it's going to be a 2-part question.
You like the
I like the
double
2-part
question.
question. So the first part is, if you could go back to a younger self in your 20s, let's say, and give yourself one piece of advice on leadership and on leading others, what would that advice be? And then the second part of that question will be for our future generation, people coming up right now. What's one piece of leadership advice you'd give them to help them on their way in their careers?
That's an easy, because my answer is going to be for both questions.
Perfect. Well, let's hear it.
It's about networking. And I remember when I started my career, it's interesting. I think I'm on the border of extroversion and introversion at times. We all probably play in different camps at different times, but I don't know why I was always nervous about reaching out and talking to other people, maybe for fear that I was going to look bad. When I should have leaned into that, reached out to different people in the industry, with competitors within the company, and just had conversations, right? It's a skill set that you can learn and get better at. The best advice I have for networking is, one, ask. To your earlier point, ask if someone would spend 15 or 20 minutes with you, take them for a coffee, Zoom is everywhere now, so you don't have to take it. You don't have to leave your desk. You can just do a video call.
Yeah.
But come prepared with questions, and it could be simple as, "Do you have advice for someone that's at this stage of my career? What did you learn?" The question you just asked. If you had to go back and look at your younger self, what would you recommend? And I've shared this with my oldest daughter. She just joined a company, and she's in a customer success role. And I happened to know some people in the company, so I said, "Have you reached out to the CEO yet?" Who I knew personally. And she goes, "No, Dad, I'm just a frontline employee." So why would you not reach out? He'll take your call. And she's all nervous about well, what do I say in the email? She wanted me to read her email, which I didn't. I just let her create it. She sent it off. Guess what happened?
He reached out.
He reached out. They
Of
had a
course.
20-minute, 30-minute conversation. And
Yeah.
I said, "How many frontline employees do you think have reached out to the CEO in this company?" Probably zero,
Yeah.
right?
Probably zero.
And so my advice for my younger self is network more. And my advice for younger people starting their career is network more. Because first of all, when you're in your 20s, you change jobs because you're trying to figure out what industry, where's your passion, your obsession, where's your interest lie,
Yeah.
right? So how are you you can figure it out on your own, which a lot of us have done, trial and error, or you can talk to people and
Yeah.
understand their career and what made them successful and what were the hardships that they learned from that you could potentially avoid. So
You
that's my
said
answer.
something that resonated with me. It reminded me of something that I heard once. And you said, I used to think if I asked a question, it would show that I didn't know it, and I would be like, okay, that might be a blind spot or a weakness. And I heard this one person say, I forget who it was who said it. It was beautiful though. He said, I used to think that if you showed humility, it showed that it showed that you didn't know something, right? But he said, now I look at humility as I need to learn something else. And he goes, and I'll lean into that any day, right? Doesn't matter how much you know. And it's so empowering when you can say to somebody, I actually don't know that, right? And can you teach me? And people respect that. People respect leaders that are in that constant lane of saying, hey, you know what? I need to know that, I guess, because I don't.
Especially at the leadership level.
Yeah.
Because gone are the days where a leader knows everything about the organization. It doesn't exist. There's
No.
too much information. The world is going way too fast. There's too many competitors. The best leaders put their hand up and say, "I don't know." And then you look at your leadership team or your department and go, "Does anyone have an idea how we can solve this?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
We could talk for another hour, by the way,
I
because I
know,
have a
I
bunch of
know,
other
I know,
things, but
I know.
I know we're on a time crunch here, and I really appreciate this today.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Brad,
Jason.
I appreciate you coming in today, and I love the fact that you shared your thoughts. You are an inspirational leader, and it's nice that, and I've experienced it, that you literally, people say they put people first, but you actually do it. You have a stake in the ground on that. So thanks for being part of the show today. I appreciate you, and I appreciate everything you do, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's next.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate you too.
All right, buddy. Cheers.
Cheers.
If you loved that session and that conversation as much as I did, would love to have you join our People Playbook community in the link below.